Welcome to the Wellbeing Uprising. I'm your host, Bethany Ainsley. Today we're exploring introversion and extroversion in leadership and teams. A common perception is that introversion and extroversion are about shyness or confidence. However, research from the 5-factor model shows they're really about how we gain and use energy. Introverts recharge in quieter, low stimulation environments, while extroverts draw energy from interaction and activity. Most people sit somewhere in between on the spectrum. These differences shape how we lead, communicate, and cope with pressure. And when workplaces misunderstand them, well-being and performance can suffer. To explore this, I'm joined by 2 incredible guests. Alfie Joey, whose career in broadcasting, comedy, and coaching gives him a unique perspective on how personality influences communication, creativity, and confidence.
It always shocks people because they presume if can speak in front of 1,000 people or 300 people, that must equal high extrovert. And it's not the case.
And Richard Lane, co-founder of Durhamlane, who specialises in sales, outsourcing and performance. He has worked extensively with a wide range of leaders to help them play to their strengths.
The introvert is typically a much better listener, and being an active listener is a fundamental to being successful in sales.
So Alfie, you spent years interviewing and presenting. Do you think you lean more towards introverted, extroverted, or something in between?
Well, it's funny you should say that because I know I've changed. So when I was younger, I was high extrovert, off the scale extrovert. We did a Myers-Briggs when I was at seminary. I trained to be a priest many years ago. And part of the formation was an intensive weekend-long Myers-Briggs personality test. And they test you sort of extroverts, introverts. They got all the introverts to sit at one side of the room, all the extroverts to sit at the other side of the room. And we all had to describe each other, and we were calling them boring, and they were calling us big mouth whatevers. And what that does, if you take it seriously, helps you address who you are, and you can work from your shadow side, and your awareness develops. And I realized that as a high extrovert, I must have been annoying everyone. But I was young, and that was part of who I was. But I also just developed a more sensitive awareness, and all those times where I would fill gaps with chat, I started to sit back and listen more. We also did a counselling course. And so that was all about listening, increasing your listening powers and ability. And years later, decades later, when I started on the radio, we did a Myers-Briggs again. Me and my co-host did it so we could work out the power dynamic, who'd be high status, who'd be low status. And I was an introvert. And it always shocks people because they presume if can speak in front of 1,000 people or 300 people, that must equal high extrovert. And it's not the case. And I'm definitely an introvert. I feel very uncomfortable in certain situations. I do feel okay on a stage because that's where I put all my focus and preparation, and that's what I'm getting ready for. The bit I find hard is 12 people around a table having a meal at an awards ceremony, where I've just got to make small talk and answer questions across the table in a one-person conversation. So it does surprise people, but I know a friend of yours, Herb Kim, who runs all of the TED Talks in the north of England, just about, he's observed that many of the best speakers are introverts, and they put more care and thought into what they do. And sometimes the brash extroverts crash in thinking they can do it, and it sometimes doesn't translate into the actual delivery of communication.
Yeah, and it's a lot of it's around where you get your energy from, isn't it? So do you feel more energized when you're having time on your own, for example?
Absolutely crucial, yeah. I have to prepare in a solitary way, and I like to find a space or a gap, or I usually say if I'm hosting an awards night or a complicated event where I'm going to be facilitating, I'll say, don't put me on the table for the dinner. I'm working for you. I'll eat chips with the tech guys, and I'll just concentrate on the job. And I'll find a little space, go through the script as many times as I can, turn up really early, find the little cubby hole where I can just focus and be in absolute silence, just me and the script.
So I noticed that when we worked on Strictly Nouveau, I saw you with your notes and I was like, he's in the zone. But I feel very similar, to be honest. And I've had, when I was a dancer, a choreographer in particular noticed that about me. So it's, you're just taking that time to prepare. But also when I used to teach as well, I loved being around people during that time. But at the end of the day, I was just ready to have some time on my own.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and really recharge.
Absolutely. And when I get back after any kind of conference, awards night, gig, I can't go straight to bed. I'm wired. I've given it so much. And I'm flat out shattered, but I know I won't be able to sleep. I've got to sort of decompress and just take an hour or two just to quietly come down myself.
Yeah. And what about yourself, Richard?
I think I've learned a new word. It's an ambivert. So I feel really comfortable in both spaces. So I can very easily stand up on stage and talk to hundreds, thousands of people. I love being around other people. I love being on my own. I need a lot of the things Alfie's just talked about in terms of being able to focus, concentrate. I'm very happy in being with myself. So I was just trying to think there, if the 0 to 100, one's on either end and 50's in the middle, I'm sort of 48, 52 really, probably, I think. And I guess sometimes I think my preference is I would rather not have to spend time in that massive group. And then other times I love being in that group. But I think through my work as well, I've probably opposite to you. I've learned to, or maybe the same to you actually, I've learned to be the right person in the right situation for what we're trying to achieve, I think. So feel really comfortable in both areas.
Yeah. And people would often assume that sales is an extrovert's world. What would you say to that?
I think it very much used to be. It was the art of selling. If you go back to Mad Men, and if you go back to the 60s, it was very much gift of the gab. Even when I started my first business in 2009 up here, really, if you could speak or blag your way through an interview, you tended to get the job, and that was it. There was no more sales training around that. I think the world's changed dramatically, and now the science of selling is really strong. The process that sits behind it, I think the introvert is typically a much better listener, and being an active listener is a fundamental to being successful in sales. So I think the extrovert style used to be the sort of preach and the pitch, whereas actually the consumer now is wanting to be consulted, to talk about value and to have their problems understood, and then chat, and then solutions to be provided. And I think real extroverts struggle with that because they are just wanting to just move stuff forward all the time.
Yeah. And listening is so important, isn't it, in terms of sales and understanding what the customer really wants. I suppose there's an element of confidence as well, isn't there, in terms of actually being able to pick up the phone and continue to make those calls, especially if you're receiving a lot of no's. And Alfie, you'll understand in terms of the world of performing arts and things.
Yeah. I think confidence is the number one subject that comes up when I'm doing coaching, when I'm at a table, when I talk about communication or speaking in public. It's confidence and fear. And again, people are shocked when I tell them I get nervous. It just means you care, and I've got different ways of dealing with it. But I really think that it's a work in progress, and you've constantly got to work at being confident. I think people who tell you that they have no problems, I never get shy, I never get nervous, they're usually quite unbearable. Mm-hmm. And they're the annoying person on the table that can't hear themselves or don't have any awareness. And I'm constantly working on my confidence, constantly working on processes, techniques to get me in shape for any particular project. And I think it can go away from you very quickly if you don't pay attention to it.
So I'm a bit of a pop psychologist. And as part of our selling at high level methodology at Durhamlane, we've got what we call the belief equation. And that is belief plus knowledge gives you confidence. Times that with understanding what is the buyer trying to achieve makes you high performance. And I really am passionate about the fact that you've got to believe in what you do, but you've also got to know your stuff. You've got to know what you do. You've got to know why you do it. You've got to understand the world of your customer, because what sort of separates the blaggers from the people that have confidence that is appealing is knowledge. And actually, I think what tends to happen is that people, particularly very extrovert people, tend to think they can skip the knowledge bit. So don't have to do the training, don't have to do the deep dive into the subject, and therefore they come across as arrogant. And I think that's that sort of little dividing line.
Absolutely. And I think the preparation as well and the rehearsal comes into that for me. There's a clip I show some clients who are, want to get into this. Boris Johnson came to the Port of Tyne a few years ago, and he gave a talk, and he started freewheeling about Peppa Pig, and he lost his place, and his notes went everywhere, and everyone tends to, or used to when he was in power, would say, he's still a great communicator, he can really cut through, but it doesn't matter how confident you are, how brash you are, if you're not prepared, everything can fall to pieces. And it's a really good example where everything did.
So in terms of people who are more introverted and they possibly need to increase that confidence, where would you say to start, Alfie, based on your experience?
Exactly what we just said. I would say the better you know what you want to say, the more prepared you are. That will definitely reduce a lot of your nerves. The times I've come a cropper, like Boris Johnson, are the times when I wasn't prepared enough. And so now I over-prepare, over-deliver. The more I know a script, the more I look at it, the less I need it. And that's all preparation. That just makes me feel more confident. I also do different exercises. There's lots of great exercises on YouTube about body language before you do an event. So I talk myself into an event instead of talking myself out of it. Again, especially when I've done stand-up comedy, sometimes you can look out and go, oh God, there's a stag party there. They look horrible. This is going to be awful. Oh no, they look like they're going to heckle. And my body starts to curl over. And so now, before I go on, it sounds quite romantic, but I'll look at the microphone in the shaft of light. If I'm in the wings of a theatre, say, where you can hide a bit, and I roll my shoulders back instead of drooping forward, and I remind myself how lucky I am to do what I do. And last night, I think of it when I see people doing jobs, I think, wow, that's a toughie. So last night, put the milk bottles out, and I thought, what an awful night to do a milk round. I drove over the Tyne Bridge last night, and there was a guy putting cones out in all weathers, and I think, well, look, I get to do this. How lucky am I? It's just flipping it and just reminding yourself that it's an opportunity rather than doom and gloom. And I just think nerves are healthy. It means you care. I hear the phrase imposter syndrome all the time, and I try and encourage clients to reframe that. Syndromes are medical conditions, they're horrible, and I don't call it imposter syndrome, I call it healthy, humble excitement. Healthy, it's good for you, and humble, it means you care. And excitement, it's an opportunity.
I also think it's a sign of growth as well. So if you are feeling that uncomfortable feeling, stepping out of that comfort zone can mean stepping into growth as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Do you think some of the techniques that Alfie spoke about there can be translated into sales, or is there anything similar that you might be doing?
Yeah, I mean, 100%. So I've done it for years. I have a image. I read a book when I was about 17 or something. I've got an image in my head that I use to get myself into the right mindset. And I've used that for years and years before I go on stage, deliver a training course. I have that image, a bit like yourself, Alfie. Practice makes perfect. So in my world of sales outsourcing, I always say to people who've just started with us, first 100 calls. Before you've made the first 100 calls, you don't really know what you're doing. You're thinking about your questions more than you're listening to the answers. So until you've got into the habit and the comfort of the world you're talking about, the conversations you're trying to have, you can't really actively listen anyway. So, and guess what happens? Once you sort of know your stuff, your shoulders go back, you feel more confident, get people to stand up when they're making calls because your body language changes. So much, everything's linked, and a healthy mindset is where it all starts. So lots of things that link business and sport together, and I'm a real fan of that whole sort of creative visualization thing, and being able to prepare yourself mentally for what's about to happen, and then your body can go through the repetition, and then you move into different, a bit like you were saying, you move into different stages, and I think when you stop getting nervous about something, then you stop trying. And so you should always have that feeling of that tingle. Whenever I've delivered thousands of training courses, totally, and even if I'm doing it, I did one on Tuesday over Teams, which is not the best in the world. Much rather be with a group of people face to face. But just before we started, I prepped for ages for it. It was content I knew really well, but I'm with different groups. Just before we started, day before, those sort of tingles, how's it going to go? Thinking through different scenarios. Then you get yourself ready and you go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Someone asked me, "Oh, come on, you must fake it occasionally. You can't possibly be interested." I do events that I know nothing about the industry, really. That I do the Northern Law Awards, the Accountancy Awards, but I think that's their Wembley. That is a huge night for those people, and the client. They booked me to host, so I give it absolutely everything. I treat it really, as if it is their best night and my best night, but I believe in it. I want them to have a cracking night to remember. That's my job.
Mm-hmm. And you do that.
Well, I try.
You do.
I try. Yeah.
So in the workplace, where do you think introverts and extroverts potentially misunderstand each other?
I think in my world, so as a sales outsourcing company, you get all sorts of people. And I think that's right. Like, you wouldn't want a room just full of extroverts. That'd be chaos. And you wouldn't want a room just full of introverts because it wouldn't be as fun, probably, So you need the mix. You need sort of the sort of chocolate box of people in your business. And I think both can feed off each other. So when you think about putting teams together, then think about who you've got and think about the types of styles and the types of way that people work and try and match them together. So we're conscious of that, and we try and match teams together. We have different leaders with different skills, and we put them together and help them sort of coach each other. Ever since the beginning of Durhamlane, we've embedded something called the 70-20-10 learning model. So 70% of what you learn is in the moment on the job. So how do you provide that support? 20% through formalized coaching and 10% through training courses and formal learning. And different people suit different moments. So try and get that mix, but be conscious of whose preference. And then you've probably got people a bit like me who sit in the middle and can go on either side. And everyone's got a bit of all of it in them, haven't they? So everyone, even the biggest introverts, can be a bit extrovert, and vice versa.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think it just does come down to good leadership. You hear football managers, the great football managers could deal with the hot head and the workhorse and blend it all together, and everyone feels like they're being led well. And I think that's what you sound like you do.
Yeah. And also thinking about the environment as well. So creating an environment where different people can thrive. So like we mentioned before, having that quieter space for people who need just 30 minutes on their own or whatever it might be. Is that something that you've thought about with Durhamlane as well?
Yeah, we have, and we have different breakout rooms, so people are free to go where they need to go. I mean, and this is quite an interesting thing as well. It's a good point, because we don't want someone to just be sitting in a room on their own all day, because whilst that might be the most comfortable thing for them, it's probably not the best thing for them in terms of how they learn. Just at the same point, if someone's like totally brash all day, then there's probably an opportunity to get them in a room sometime and give everyone a break.
And can I ask you about working from home for your teams? Are there some of them that would be better off working from home a couple of days?
Well, so we have hybrid. We have some people that are fully remote, and that I don't think we found the answer to that yet. I think that's that's a really interesting point. We continue to work really hard on getting the right mix and the right balance there. I think supporting people that are fully remote, doing a sales job, particularly at the top end of the sales funnel, which is our world, which is calling, emailing, etc. And it's really hard. So if you're a big introvert and you're sitting at home all day doing that, but at the same time, if you're a big extrovert sitting at home doing that on your own, then there's no one to feed off. So we use Teams, we use Zoom and stuff to try and create that collaboration. But that is a challenge, I think.
Yeah. Yes, it's interesting, isn't it, how that could potentially lead into loneliness as well, which is actually what we're talking about on our next episode. So
right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Tune in.
Yeah. Tune in.
We'll be there.
Yeah. So just taking it back to your experience again, Alfie, when you are preparing for a big event or you're in that high pressure scenario, how would you get yourself prepared for that?
I very often try. You don't always achieve it, but I always think, what can I do that I haven't done before? So I've got an event tomorrow night at Close House Farm. So I did it for the first time last year, and I thought, they went, it's pretty much the same as last year. What time can you get there? I said, as early as you like. So we arranged a time, and then I thought, what could I do that would be different or more special? So I've got a little idea that would make them go, he didn't do that last year. So I always try and keep it fresh for me, for the client, for the audience. Otherwise you could just slip into that dangerous zone of just phoning it in and it just being the same. And also I try and do it in such a way so it's not about me, even though I'm trying to do it for them, but always trying to put the spotlight on the event and on the people who are there. And that's my...
Do you not find that because the audience is always different, then it's different? So when I used to be in a band, I used to be totally happy playing the same stuff because it would always be, in my mind, it would always be different. Yeah, my mate, who was the lead singer guitarist as well, would always want to do new stuff. You know, and I think probably my introvert nature was very happy doing the stuff that we know, and he always wanted to mix it up, and I used to, because I always felt a different sort of feed off, and it's the same with sales training, is that you've always got a different audience, so everything changes slightly, but I don't feel the need to bring brand new stuff in every time, because
only as a like sort of a pipette, I just drop a new bit in. Funny enough,
is it more for you or more for them? Do you think?
Both. I think both, because I think the client, they're more tempted, and I think that's totally fine. Every few years, want to freshen things up or change things around. But if you keep doing a new little thing each time, they'll be less likely to go, we need to freshen this up if you're freshening up yourself. But funny enough, with stand-up comedy, I tend to do a lot of the same stuff because I know it works, and I think comedy's harder than hosting an awards night or facilitating. It's just a different, the metric's different. You have to make people laugh. So I take less chances and do the bits I know that work and are really well rehearsed, and I don't do it as much either, so I can't, go out and workshop it anymore. But yeah, it's funny, the music and comedy thing is similar there.
The comedy, because you do a comedy course as well, don't you?
I have done the last couple of years, and that's again is fascinating in exactly the same way I mentioned about that high extrovert thing where, and I only do it through LinkedIn, people who run businesses or sole traders or whatever, they are welcome to sign up for this course. And I tell them at the outset, this is not to make you a stand-up comedian, but this will give you an incredible experience of public speaking. And any other experience won't be as hard as this, because the metric with stand-up's different. The metric is laughter during, not applause at the end. So if you're in a band, or if you do Shakespeare, if you do a presentation, you probably get a ripple of applause at the end. But with comedy, that's not what you're measured by. You're measured by laughs during. And so if you don't get them, it hasn't worked. So that's what's scary about it. But very interestingly, as I said before, the brashest people who turn up with it already and not always the star of the night. It's sometimes the person who's been more measured and has grown through the weeks. And I have to say, I thought it would be an interesting thing to do, but it was much more, I thought, brilliant for the people who did it than I thought it was ever going to be.
So do you get many introverted people doing the course?
Yes,
and why do they go into it, and what do you think they get out of it?
Well, I know they get an incredible high. And this happened after the first one, and then it happened again after the second one. I knew it happened again after the third one. I told them, I said, look, I can give you enough tools to get over the line on that first night. I'll compare it. We'll make sure it's a safe, your friends will all be there. They'll all be rooting for you. We'll tell people, what the boundaries are, and so you'll have a great night. It will be an extraordinary feeling. I said, but you'll want to do it again. And the second time you do it will be nowhere near as exciting. And we did it, and they all came off and went, we can't leave it there. We've got to do it again. So
let's go on tour.
Yeah, honestly. So I said, well, I'll tell you what, you book the gig, I'll compare, we'll do it for charity. But they booked on both occasions a gigantic, pretty ropey social club. And it was cavernous. Even I walked in after doing it for decades, and I was like, sticky mouth, this is going to be awful. And so I got them all in the green room, and I said, right, this is hard. This is nothing like the experience you've had. What I want you to do is go through your set as if there's no one there. You practice in your bedroom mirror and just go from it. Don't reference there's nobody laughing, there's nobody there, there's people sat at the back and miles away. So all of them did that. I was so proud. But one of them, when we came off at the end of the night, said to me, I'm glad we did that, because now I know I don't want to be a stand-up comedian. I said, well, that is the reality. That is what it's like when you start out, and it's just lots and lots of nights like that. And you learn nothing from the glory nights. It's the tough nights where you find out what to do when a joke doesn't work. It's dead easy. Once you know a joke works, you press that button and it tends to get a laugh. But when it doesn't work, what do you do then? That's the hardest bit.
So this is an interesting question, if you can translate what individuals learn there to the workplace, what would you say the sort of skills and personal development things would be?
I think personal development, it's a feeling of accomplishment and achievement. And I think in public speaking terms, it's a pretty big one. It really does make a difference in ways that I hadn't planned or expected. So I had a guy who he gave away his daughter a couple of weeks ago, and he was in the first cohort, and he put something in a WhatsApp group saying I'd changed his life. He'd never been able to do anything publicly, and now he speaks regularly at networking events at Lumley Castle, and he does networking events all over the Northeast. And then he said the big one was doing a speech at his daughter's wedding. So there's a guy who's transformed. He was just not a public speaker, and now he's very at ease, and that was, he says, was down to that comedy course.
Is that something that you see as well in terms of sales development, or who you might pick for a public speaking event or other sort of opportunities within the business?
Yeah, I love it when people put their hand up to say, let me lead this session, or I go and find people and say, why don't you lead that session? Because I think as a country, we don't train people to speak publicly.
No.
You know, I've got people in the company that have never ever spoken publicly, and everything Alfie said is so true. It's just such a growth moment. And whether you're speaking to 5 colleagues, 25 colleagues, 2,500 people, it's sort of the same. It's like they always say that the hardest gig you ever play is in your front room to your family. You know, it's like that versus 5,000 people you can't see. It's the same. You know, it's harder, but it's such a growth moment. And I would encourage anybody to just find the opportunity and put your hand up and lead a session. It doesn't have to be anything major. It doesn't have to be a comedy night. It can be, I want to do a session at a team meeting.
A Zoom meeting, yeah. I think as well, now is the time to do it, because, and I'm not saying with me, with just yourself, with anyone, because of the era we live in, it's crucial, I think, to work on this. It's the Zoom boom. I say this over and over again, the panel and the podcast. It's the Reels revolution. That's how people are consuming story now. It is through speaking. And you don't have to be Graham Norton or Claudia Winkleman or Ian McKellen. You just need to be a better version of yourself, like that guy who went from being really shy in networking meetings to really enjoying it. And I just think if you're not paying attention to that, you're losing. There's so much opportunity. YouTube Shorts, whatever's in at the minute, look at what it is and think, well, I'll just do some of them. And it's such a fast world that you've got very little to lose by training.
As you were talking, I was thinking LinkedIn, the sort of video. And the reality is, and what I said was, don't worry, because it'll be gone by within 60 minutes. You know, no one will be seeing it. No one will be seeing anyway. So just put yourself out there a bit.
Yeah. And I think you're often the worst critic on yourself as well, aren't you? So
always the worst critic. Yeah, I think
bear that in mind.
You should be. Yeah.
Yeah.
So just one final question for you both. What is one thing that you would like our listeners to take away from today's conversation? It could be something that we haven't mentioned at all, or something we've already spoken about.
Find an opportunity to put yourself out there and say yes. That's the one. No matter pretty much in the lives we live, nothing you do is going to be the end of the world. So put yourself out there, and that will be a growth moment. And 99% of the time, it will be amazing. You'll enjoy it, and you'll want to do more of it. So that'd be the first thing. I think the second thing is to both our introverts and our extrovert listeners, try and channel a bit of the other side, because if you can exist in both worlds, then there are huge benefits from each side, and being just one thing is never usually as good as being able to cover both areas. So try and channel a bit of the other.
Yeah, brilliant.
Be wary of that saying, which I think everyone in business hears, certainly self-employed people hear a lot, even from people who know and love them, but it's all right for you. It's all right for you. You've got a job you love. It's all right for you. You don't worry. It's all right for you. You're confident. It's all right. I think everyone has an Achilles heel. Everyone has moments of weakness. Everyone has moments where they lose the confidence and have a wobble. Everyone's got a bad gig in them. And it's, just be careful of just saying, well, it's all right for you. Because usually I think people who say that don't usually add on, it's all right for you. You've worked bloody hard.
Yeah.
They never add that.
You remind me of something I say there is, I say, if you never trip up, you're not trying to run fast enough. If you never stumble, then you're sort of probably coasting. So go out there and try it. But remember that behind every success, there are lots of growth moments.
Absolutely, yeah. And we've got to keep having them, otherwise we stop, don't we?
Yeah.
Well, thank you both for joining me. It's been a great conversation.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.